Hello everyone. I have the pleasure today and I am honored to introduce everyone to Miss Denise Timpko. She's a writer and publisher for many years. So Denise, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for
We
inviting me.
appreciate your time too. Tell me a little bit about your background and what inspired you to start writing.
Well, I am a professional nonfiction writer. I worked for 42 years and retired in 2013. However, I have always wanted to write almost as long as I can remember. Well, actually, as long as I can remember. I was 3 years old in our backyard. I saw a blimp, which, it wasn't an airplane. And so I asked my mother what it was, and she told me. And so I was very interested. I wanted to write about it and explain it to other people. At the same time, my father was reading stories to me, and I love stories. I have always loved books. And so he was reading the Chicken Little book. Henny Penny, I think, was the version of it we had. I thought that was a great book. And he was also reading the 12 Dancing Princesses, which was great because the princess, the heroine, was the youngest princess. And I was the youngest child, so therefore we bonded.
Yeah.
And I wanted to write stories. As soon as I could understand that I could write stories. I didn't realize that being a technical writer meant that I would be explaining the blimp, but apparently being a technical writer was in my genes. So I wanted to write nonfiction and I wanted to write fiction. I just quite didn't realize what the difference was at 3 years old.
Yeah. And how long you have been doing that?
I started writing when I was around 7. I don't remember any stories before that. I wrote a story about a snowman. I began writing stories at that time, children's stories. And I also began writing newsletters when I was 12 that were basically nonfiction, but
Yes.
I would write about things that were going on in my friends and my life. And so I wrote a lot of newsletters professionally as an adult for different places, corporations, associations, etc. So I wanted to write anything.
Yeah.
Because writing was what I wanted to do.
That's what it was your passion for.
It was. It was.
So tell us a little bit about, I see here a couple of great books and I love the title. Like this one is said, The Firma Twins and the Flute of Enchantment. So tell me a little bit, how did you come up by the title of your books?
The books are loosely based on stories I told to my cousins when I was 12. The stories I told were really quite silly. So I decided to change them, obviously, to make them less silly. And so I decided to write about these identical twin sisters who live in Arlington, Virginia.
Oh.
And they were the Firma twins, Isis and Electra. So I had decided that I needed to make them a series. So obviously they would be called the Firma twins, and then whatever was the subject of that particular book. The series is basically going to be a series of an unending series. That is, I can write as many stories in the Firma twins as I want.
Mm-hmm.
The first book, which was the Firma twins and the Purple Staff of Death, is told by the oldest twin, Isis. And the second book, the Firma twins and the Flute of Enchantment, is told by the youngest twin, Electra. And so the next book, which I'm writing, is called The Firma Twins and the Paisley Egg, and that will be told by Isis.
And that one you are still writing that.
I am
now.
writing
That's
that.
what you are.
Yeah, I haven't finished yet, but yes, I'm writing that. So in the first book, Isis Firma, discovers a couple of things. There had been 2 alien races living on Earth, unknown, for 10,000 years, and they are warring alien races, arch enemies. And it turns out the one alien race, the Squirrelon, are actually ancestors of the Firma family.
Wow.
Which they didn't know before for complicated reasons. And so the Firma family is supposed to protect the Squirrelon from the Vampira, who are vampiric to the Squirrelon. They're vampires to the Squirrelon. And so, anyway, they discovered this in the first book. And in the second book, The Flute of Enchantment, Elektra infiltrates a science fiction convention put on by the Vampirum, the evil aliens. And so she has to infiltrate and find the Flute of Enchantment, which was actually something the Firma family had inherited, but the Vampirum had killed their uncle, who had originally had the flute.
Yeah. Ah, interesting. So, what was one of the most surprising you think you learned while you're writing these books?
Well, in the second book, I was writing the 4th or 5th chapter, and I'd come to a problem that I had planned to be there, but I realized when I was writing the problem, Elektra needed some assistance, and I created a character which I had not planned to create. And normally when I write books, I plan all the characters, I write the descriptions of the characters in advance. But this one, I said, yeah, I really need this character. Her name is Pricklethorn, and she is one of the Vampirum, one of the evil Vampirum who's the same age as Elektra. And she shows up, and she has a major role, as it turns out, in the entire book. I really liked Pricklethorn a great deal. She was very helpful, but she was a Vampirum. She was a bad alien. So I had a lot of fun in writing about her. And she and Elektra become fairly close.
Nice, nice, wow. And what is, on your experience for all these years, what is the most difficult part about writing? What do you think?
It's writing the first chapter.
Is the hardest?
It is. I have rewritten the first chapters of those 2 books, even the books I'm writing now, a couple of times. The problem is that when you're writing a book and you start out and you plan it out, and I planned mine reasonably well, except for that Pricklethorn, that was a surprise. But you don't know the world, you don't know the characters as well as you do when you have finished the book. When you finish the book, you know these characters, you know the world they live in. Yeah. And so you go back to the first chapter and you say, well, this is not going to work. Yes, I introduced the characters, I introduced the world, but I didn't really do a good number on this. And so you have to rewrite the chapter. Because you have so much more knowledge about the book and the characters than you did when you started, even if you planned very well.
Wow. So it took what time? Like it took a time, right? I mean, it took you time to go back, and maybe when you're reading it, you would say, "Oh, you know, I have to edit here or edit there." How long normally will it take you to finish up one book? Or depends about the story or how you are,
It depends. It depends on what is interrupting me. Yeah. I have a number of interruptions that I can't plan for.
Yeah.
And so, I would say it takes a year and a half, depending on what else is going on in my life. And when I'm writing a book, I'm not going to go back and edit the book immediately. I will edit the book if I'm a member of a writer's group, and so when we put up chapters or whatever posting we have that we share every month, they may make comments, and I may go back at that time and incorporate very simple comments. And later, if they have made any comments that need to be made, but they're complicated, I'm not going to make those comments immediately. I'll save all the comments that I've received. But I don't want to make any complicated changes immediately. I've been a writer professionally for a long time. And so basically, you do the same thing. When you get comments from the people you're working with, you want to make the simple comments, but you don't necessarily want to make the complicated things that you're going to have to think about and figure out how you're going to incorporate them.
Yeah.
It's a matter of efficiency. And I've learned that from my job, be efficient. And so that has actually, strangely enough, come over to my fiction writing. And if there are complicated things, I want to make them all at the same time, because making one complicated change may ripple down through whatever chapters or even the book, depending upon when you're making them. So I mostly want to finish writing the book immediately, make any minor changes that the writers in my group have suggested, and then finish the book, and then go back and do several edits.
Edit what you wanted to edit on.
Yeah.
Any challenges did you face? Share with us some of the challenges.
The challenges, I'm writing science fiction.
Yeah.
And in science fiction, you need to plan what world they're going to be in.
Yeah.
And in this world, it's mostly, in the Fermi Twins, it's mostly our world. But there are things that are with the aliens that have, we don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
That has to be planned. And so you have to plan those things before you write the books, but you also have to continually add to that, because you discover that you haven't planned as well as you would like to have. And so that's something that you need to do throughout. But hopefully you've planned well enough. But that is the difficult thing. When you get to one of the books I'm writing now, which takes place on Earth in the future and also on another planet, there's a lot to basically build that world.
Yeah. Wow.
And so there's a lot of things you have to do before you finish the book.
And it's all time consuming too.
Everything is time consuming.
Yeah.
The writing part, when you are really going, it's actually great fun. Unless you're writing the first chapter and discovering later that you have not done as well a job as you would have hoped. But that's what it is.
So, Miss Denise, what I read a little bit about you, that you've been over, I think, over 42 years on writing and publishing.
On my professional job.
Yeah. What do you give a new writer, someone to start up? What advice would you give?
Two things. First is to learn your craft, i.e., learn what you need to learn about writing fiction. I wrote nonfiction for many years, and writing nonfiction has different goals than writing fiction. For example, in nonfiction, I worked for IT organizations for the last 20 years of my life, of my professional life. And there you are basically trying to explain things to people, make it clear. You don't necessarily want to do that in fiction. It's quite a different beast. And so you have different goals. So people, when they begin writing, they need to learn how to write fiction. And one of the things they should do is join an organization. I write children's and young adult books, and I am a member of the Society for, it's SCBWI for writers, book writers and illustrators. And that is extremely helpful for people who write not science fiction, but who write for children and for young adults. You can go to conferences, you can go to various meetings during the year, and you meet people who are writers, and they have been professionally published for years. You learn from them. There's so much that you learn from joining an organization.
Yeah.
Friends of mine were members of the Romance Writers of America, and the same thing, depending on your genre. There's all kinds of organizations. The other thing that is extremely helpful is to join a writers group. When you're a new writer especially, new writers, and I have been there, are very sensitive to comments about their writing. Really sensitive about comments. And so, for example, any sentence is the best sentence they have ever written, and it is the best sentence that has ever been written by anybody. And how dare you suggest that you make a change? We have all been there. The one thing that helped me, and I too was almost that way, but the one thing that helped me was in writing, for my career, I learned that very quickly. Engineers or technical experts are going to critique your work a great deal, and you will see lots of great comments, and then the lawyers will do it even more. And so you get over that.
Yeah.
And that kind of, even with the fiction, I even had that sensitivity many years ago, but I got over that very quickly. And I realized that, these comments, whether they are comments that you're going to incorporate or not, they're comments that are worthy of being considered. And, you don't know what your entire audience is going to think about your writing, and what you're getting with the writers is a part of your audience. Maybe they're not children, but they will still have good comments. And so writers group are very helpful for that reason, but they also are helpful after you've been a member of a writers group, or even when you start. You're going to give people, other writers, critiques. Yeah. And you're going to be giving comments to them. And you want to make your comments worthwhile. You don't want to obviously slaughter their work, but you want to make something that is going to make a difference to the quality of their work. Or a comment that, maybe they'll consider, and they won't make this comment, but they'll think about it and say, maybe that's a good idea, or maybe in another book, maybe that's what I'll do. I don't know. But you're basically, it's a feedback kind of thing. They're giving you comments, you're giving them comments, and you're learning to do it in a professional way. And
and you learn from each other.
You do. You learn. That is the whole process. You are learning, and you are learning the craft. Yeah. Because everybody, hopefully, is going to have learned or is learning how to write well for fiction or nonfiction, for that matter. And you're going to be learning a great deal.
Yeah. Any book, Miss Denise, you did read in the past, not one of your book, which of course you created this book, you did enjoy a lot reading, and you advise people who are fan to read fiction or nonfiction to read?
My husband and I collect books, and we have over 10,000 books. I have read a great many books. I have a library of about, actually it's a little over 1,000 children's and young adult books, which at my age I am now going to be giving away these books because it makes sense. However, some of my early favorite books were the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. They're not science fiction. I would read anything. When I was a child, I would read everything. From Reader's Digest to my father had gun magazines. I mean, I had no interest in guns, but I would read them because they'd come into the house, and it would be something to read. Some of the children's books that I absolutely love are written by Daniel Pinkwater. The first book I read by him as an adult, I didn't read these as a child, was a book called Lizard Music. It was so funny. I just simply had to read everything he had written. I think one of the books he's published recently, I think in 2020, was The Adventures of the I don't know how you pronounce it, Dwergish Girl, Dwergish girl. At any rate, he wrote a book called Young Adult, which is hilarious, and children like his books. He has picture books, he has young adult books, has middle grade books. I absolutely adore Daniel Pinkwater. There's so many others that I like that I'm actually not able to remember at the moment, which is really sad because I have all these books. Diana Wynne Jones, I love her. Unfortunately, she died a few years ago. Joan Aiken, I found her when I was an adult as well. She has a series of books which are wonderful. And
so you have probably, if we look to your library today at home, you have a book for Daniel Pinkwater.
I have all the books I just mentioned. Yeah, I do. Yeah. So there are some of these books that I will never give away.
Yeah.
You know, there are other books that I absolutely love,
yeah.
But, you know, I have a 14-year-old great niece.
Yeah.
You know,
pass it on.
Yeah,
for your
exactly.
family.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about that because, you know, but unfortunately, I probably will just buy Daniel Pinkwater books for her and not give her the ones I have.
Can you tell us a little bit where can the readers purchase your book? So how many books total, Miss Denise, you wrote in your career? You know, average. I don't know if you remember that.
Fiction or nonfiction?
The both. All in total as books. How many books did you wrote?
You know, as far as nonfiction, I am not sure that I would be able to remember how many books.
You did write a lot.
Yeah, well, you know, also I was a team leader and lead teams of writers, illustrators, and editors to write books and online help, online books, and I would be responsible for those. I wrote a number of books. I've written a lot of books. I've written a lot of newsletters. As far as fiction, I've only published 2 fiction books of my own.
Okay.
I've published 2 nonfiction books, and I've published 3 fiction books for other people. I have 2 books. There's the Firma Twins book, the 3rd one in the series that I'm writing, but I'm also writing a book called Stranders, which I may have mentioned earlier, which is a book I wrote in the 1990s. And I wrote the complete book, but complete is sort of misleading because I set that book aside. I liked the plot, I liked the characters, but I looked at the book and I said, I really don't know how to write fiction. You know, it's a great plot. Some of the things are good that I wrote, but this is what I mentioned this is when I got involved in organizations like the SCBWI, so that I could learn how to write fiction. You know, I know how to write nonfiction. That's easy, but because I did it for so many years, and I learned that. But fiction is different. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to set this book aside. And then about 2 years ago, I picked up the book. I mean, you never throw anything you write away.
You start to write.
Yeah. And I looked at it and I said, let me go through this book. And I didn't have it as a on computer, but I scanned it and I brought it into one of my programs, and I went through the book and I corrected a lot of really stupid writing mistakes. And then I thought, now I need to really write it. So I've been working on that one. And the plot is good. The plot is really good. I'm making a hell of a lot better. And I'm making the characters more fully realized, and the plot itself is more robust. It is robust. So I'm hoping that I'm working on that one first to finish more earlier than the Firma Twins book, which is maybe about 5 chapters. But this one Stranders has about 24 chapters right now. So I'm hoping I can finish that next year.
Where can we find your books?
On Amazon.
Amazon.
And
Okay.
at Barnes & Noble.
Mm-hmm. Do you have website, Mrs. Denise, you can share with us?
I do. My website is dhtimpko, TIMPKO.com. And also my publishing company, which is a very, very tiny publishing company, is www.gettiergroup.net.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your time today and sharing this. I'm sure we'll bring you back after you finish the fiction and the non-fiction, what you are continuing, and I will be. I'm gonna read that. I'm gonna read this non-fiction story because it is too serious, and you're doing the 3rd one right now, right?
I am.
Mm-hmm.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm hoping I can get back to that as soon as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Denise. We were honored to have you today, and thank you for all the time. You know, it's a long time, over 42 years writing. That's really noble. That's really noble and hard work.
Well, I like to write. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much.